What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder. I'm Warren Thompson, and there's a lot happening right now with Sony, with Madame Web, and with Spider-Man 4, which is really scary to think about. Now, I did a video on my other channel, which is new, and I would love it if you subscribed, but I did a video about Madame Web, how I felt about it, and really just the whole state of Sony as a whole right now, as the whole entire state of Sony's live-action Spider-Verse, and how it's just a disaster right now. And yeah, I think a part of everybody kind of expects it to be a disaster, but now it's bleeding over into the MCU, which is a problem. If you caught my video earlier today, we talked about how Sony could be influencing Marvel Studios' release date schedule because of what they want specifically to happen with Spider-Man 4. So this is a completely different story now. This is not Sony only kind of sabotaging themselves, but now they're affecting the MCU, which really, as I stated in my last video, just isn't cool. And here's the deal. It seems like Sony is tricking the people that they have come into their live action Spider-Verse. A lot of you might have heard these theories and stories, things like Dakota Johnson, the star of Madame Web. She fired her talent agency company a week after the trailer for Madame Web came out. And you hear these stories about her talking to Elizabeth Olsen about what it's like to work for Marvel when they're clearly not the same. But there's a theory going around that seems to make sense, which is the crazy part. But the theory is that Sony is basically tricking actors into starring in their movies, leading them to believe that they're part of the MCU. There's another interview with Sydney Sweeney where somebody asks her what it's like to be in the MCU, and basically she says, I can't really answer that. I can't really speak about that. And it makes you wonder if she really knows that she's not a part of the MCU. So now it's kind of like, well, Sony, you're making these movies that are really bad, but you're also tricking these actors into thinking they are joining the MCU. That is a good explanation, not confirmed, right? But a good explanation of why Dakota Johnson could have fired her entire talent agency after the Madame Web trailer dropped. Now, normally this is kind of like whatever, but like I mentioned, this is bleeding over into the MCU. And here's the sad part, is that it feels like Sony at this point in time don't honestly care if they make a good Spider-Man universe movie or not. Honestly, what it feels like they're doing is they're just trying to make a movie to fulfill their contract to keep the rights to Spider-Man and the Spider-Man characters that they have. Now, if you are not aware, the contract between Marvel and Sony, basically what the contract states is that Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man and all of the other Spider-Man characters that are listed on the contract as long as they do a movie between X amount of time from their last one. So basically, they do one movie and then they have a time limit as to when they have to do the next movie. And if they don't, they lose the rights to Spider-Man. That's how it works. So having that in mind, some of the bad movies might make sense because Sony kind of had to release a movie to keep the rights. And it really feels like that is what's happening with Madame Web. Not only that, but from what we know, the movie that was first written and scripted was completely different than what we actually saw. And you can just tell Dakota Johnson in her interviews lately, like she doesn't care. She knows the movie's bad. And it really feels like she was tricked throughout this entire process. And that's just sad. And if this is all true, again, we can't confirm this is true, but if it's all true, it's kind of disrespectful on Sony's part. So now we hear that they want very specific things for Spider-Man 4. Marvel Studios wants Spider-Man 4 to be a grounded film, right? Not a big multiversal film, which is the report that's been going around by Daniel RPK that states Sony wants a big, huge multiversal film. We just got that. So basically they want Marvel Studios to do the same thing that they just did with Spider-Man No Way Home, except go bigger. Well, bigger is Avengers Secret Wars. That's what Marvel Studios is building up to, and I think a lot of fans want a more grounded Spider-Man film. But the problem is, they shouldn't have a say in it at all. Now, we don't know the intricate details of what the contract says between Marvel Studios and Sony. We don't know if it says, hey, Sony gets, 50% input on what happens in the MCU movies. We have no idea. But here's the deal. The entire reason Spider-Man is in the MCU is because Sony was not doing well with Spider-Man. So you would think that Sony would just fully go, okay, here, take Spider-Man, do what you want, make it good, we'll trust you on this one, and then we can revisit the contract. Well, that's exactly what happened. And what happened? Marvel Studios and Sony redid their contract because Spider-Man did so well in the MCU. And they did so well without Sony really being involved, but now all of a sudden they want to get involved? Why? Maybe it's like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse is giving them a little bit of confidence to say, hey, maybe we can make a good Spider-Man movie, but at the same time, that's really Christopher Miller and Phil Lord. Like, it really is. I really hate that Sony is trying to affect the MCU when in reality, what they should do is just give it all to Marvel. Obviously, they're not going to sell Spider-Man back to Marvel Studios. The rights to Spider-Man, Sony is going to keep the rights to Spider-Man as long as they can, which is why I believe that they just keep pumping out these Spider-Man related movies that actually don't have Spider-Man in it. I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, they sell the rights back to Marvel Studios, but they're not going to do that. So the next thing that they could do is simply let Marvel Studios have the rights to use every character that they have the rights to currently in the MCU. And Sony completely dissolves whatever Spider-Man related universe that they're trying to make right now. That's what should happen. And I stated this in my other video. They'd probably make more money that way. Morbius didn't make any money. Madam Web is really not going to make any money. I mean, really the only thing they kind of have going for them right now is Venom. And Venom 3 is the last Venom movie with Tom Hardy. And clearly Marvel Studios has plans to use Venom in the MCU. So after Venom 3, really what Sony should do, they should just stop it all. Whatever they were trying to do with Madam Web is not going to work. You know, like having Uncle Ben, like having it's just really not going to work. Is a big swing and a miss with Madam Web and with Morbius, and everything that they're really trying to do is not really going to work. At least I don't believe it will, based on their current track record. So what they should do is close it down and give the rights to these characters to Marvel Studios, not sell the character rights, but make a new contract like they did allowing Tom Holland Spider-Man to be used in the MCU. Do a same contract and let these other characters go in the MCU. That way we could really have amazing Spider-Man movies, not actually the Amazing Spider-Man, but amazing Spider-Man movies with amazing Spider-Man characters. And this could probably make Sony a lot of money because then these characters can not only be a Spider-Man villain in a Spider-Man movie, but could interact with other villains of the MCU, and they can interact with other heroes of the MCU as well. This is what Sony should do, but they probably won't do. One, we know they'll never actually give the rights back to Marvel, but they could license the rights to them and just get rid of their own universe, but they won't, sadly. So now the next thing they're trying to do is dictate how Spider-Man 4 is going to be, which is just not cool, in all honesty. And that's what this video honestly is about, just kind of a rant, because Sony is swinging and missing with their own Spider-Man related movies, and they even tried to get stuff going, you know, like the Silk Project for Amazon, and they're doing other things, and they're just not moving because Sony has such a disconnect with what fans actually want. And again, it's kind of disrespectful. In the trailers, they showed us a lot of footage of like the Spider-Woman, right? And if you've seen the movie, you know that they're like, you could basically say they're not in the movie. They're like seconds in the movie. You get small glimpses of the future in these dream sequences, and that's it. They're not in the movie besides that. I'm literally talking seconds of screen time of them in their Spider-Woman costumes. And it's messed up because like the marketing is all about like the Spider-Woman in their Spider-Woman costumes. Basically, if you've seen the trailers, you have seen all of the footage of the Spider-Woman, and that's so messed up. And I don't think it's the writer's fault. I don't think it's the director's fault or the actors. It really comes down to the executives at Sony making bad decisions. And now those bad decisions are moving over to the MCU. They've already stated that Kevin Feige is stretched a little too thin right now and really doesn't want to make a Spider-Man movie in 2025. He wants to make it in 2026, but Sony really wants it to go out in 2025. So now there are talks of Blade being pushed back and maybe the Fantastic Four being pushed back, all because Sony wants to really control what is going on with Spider-Man 4. Sony, you don't have a good track record with Spider-Man and Spider-Man related projects, with the exception of the Across the Spider-Verse series, which again, I think is really Christopher Miller and Phil Lord. But they still want to come in and affect what Marvel Studios is doing when they have had massive success with Spider-Man in the MCU. Just let Marvel do their thing. Just let Kevin Feige do his thing. That's why you let them use Spider-Man in the MCU in the first place, because Kevin Feige knows what to do, and being in the MCU is going to make him more successful than anyone could really ever imagine. That's how it's been already. So really what I hope just happens, I mean, honestly, if the dream happens, you know, the rights go back to Marvel Studios for all the characters, and then bam, everything is immensely better with Spider-Man. The second best thing that I wish would happen were Sony does the same thing they did with Spider-Man. They simply let Marvel Studios use these characters in the MCU, shut down their own universe. But what's most likely going to happen is Sony does have some input on Spider-Man 4, but basically Kevin Feige shuts it down. I'm hoping that's what happens. What I'm hoping for is for Sony just to leave Marvel Studios alone. Let them do their thing with Spider-Man. It's been great so far, and I'm sure it's going to be really great in Spider-Man 4, Avengers Kang Dynasty, and then Avengers Secret Wars. There are great plans ahead for Spider-Man. Sony, just don't get in the way. That's all there is to it. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk today. Thanks for letting me rant about this, because it's really been bugging me, and I'm sure it's been bugging a lot of people as well. But I have faith in Marvel Studios. I think Kevin Feige really knows what to do with Spider-Man, and I'm hoping Sony doesn't interfere too much. But let me know your thoughts about all of this in the comments down below. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you can stay up to date on the MCU. And if you want to check out my other video on Madam Web on my other channel, I'll link it in the comments down below. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.